All right, we're looking at the book of Proverbs, and we are really privileged to have the book of Proverbs because in this book, God is stooping down to give us wisdom. That's its purpose. But what exactly is wisdom? I mean, we have this book that's part of the wisdom literature. That's what it is, and it's written by wise men. That's its purpose, or that's who wrote it. And it's written for the purpose of giving us wisdom. But what's wisdom? I guess it seems maybe obvious, I think. But we often use the word wisdom a little differently than the writer of Proverbs does. So we have to take a closer look. The Hebrew word is chokmah. And that's a funny word, chokmah. Apparently Afrikaans people would say it better than I do because you're supposed to kind of use your throat, the back of your throat, chokmah. And at the most basic level, chokmah, I guess you could say, is a skill. There are a couple facets to the way it's used in Proverbs, but the first is just the ability to do something well. That's wisdom. In fact, maybe it helps a little to contrast wisdom with knowledge, because a lot of times when we use the word wisdom, we're actually thinking more about knowledge, or even more basically about information. That's what we mean. So like we might say, we're looking for a job, and we would like you to pray that we have wisdom. And we mean actually, we want God to tell us exactly what job to take. In other words, we want information. Where wisdom, biblically, is bigger than that. Knowledge involves knowing certain information about something, but wisdom is knowing what to do with that information. You see the difference? One way to know what a word means is to look at other places in the Bible and see how it's used. And this word wisdom is used in other places in the Bible to talk about people who were good at certain specific skills. So like a technical skill. In Exodus 28:3, for example, God tells Moses to get all the skillful people who he gave a spirit of skill to make Aaron's garments so that he could set him apart as priest. And he's talking about tailors. Those are the skillful people. And so there's a sense in which you could say tailors are wise. That's chokmah. In that while we all know what a good outfit looks like, tailors have the ability to take thread and fabric and somehow weave all those individual pieces together to make beautiful clothes. They don't just have knowledge, they have skill. And not just tailors, obviously. Other places we read about carpenters having a kind of wisdom, and sailors as well. In this world, there are people who have studied the way certain things work, wood, sailing, whatever, and they've practiced, and as a result, they have wisdom in certain technical skills that the rest of us don't. Administrative skill is another way this term is used. Or you could say leadership skill. That's described as a kind of wisdom as well. Like in Deuteronomy chapter 1, Moses talks about how he realized when the nation of Israel got so big that he wasn't going to be able to lead them all by himself. So when he was feeling overwhelmed, he was led to choose wise, understanding, and experienced men, he says, and put them in positions of leadership. And he's talking about men who had the ability to hear what people were saying, understand what was true, make decisions that would be helpful, and put plans into place that would enable the nation to succeed. And so not everybody has that skill, clearly. And I mean, you might even have these nice, good men who you like a lot, but they just aren't skilled at administration. Where you have these others who seem to just know how it works. And that's chokmah. It's skill. And while some places in the Bible, it's technical skill like a tailor or a carpenter, and sometimes it's administrative skill like a judge or a political leader, sometimes it's more a social kind of skill. You see, some people understand how life works. And so where some people are good at working with wood and other people are good at administration, some people are good at life. They have the skill of living. And obviously that's more the kind of wisdom that Proverbs is talking about, at least first. It's the ability to make the good choices that make life easier. Listen to Proverbs 4:11 as an example. I've taught you the way of wisdom. I've led you in the paths of uprightness. When you walk, your step will not be hampered, and if you run, you will not stumble. It's like wisdom clears your path to make it easier for you to move forward. It's knowing the kind of people you can trust and knowing who to avoid. I like Proverbs 10:10. Whoever winks the eye causes trouble, but a babbling fool will come to ruin. It's knowing how to deal with conflict and not make it worse. Proverbs 15:1. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. It's knowing what to say and when to say it. Proverbs 15:23. To make an apt answer is a joy to a man, and a word in season, how good it is. It's about knowing how to make good friends, wisdom, the kind of friends to make, understanding how to handle money, when to give, how to save. It's about the skill of handling all these little details of life in a way that works and in a way that's good. As Solomon says, if you look back at chapter 1, verse 3, it's instruction in wise dealing. It is instruction in righteousness, in justice, and equity. It's being smart about relationships, not just for the sake of being smart and getting what you want from those relationships, but so that you can do what's right, what's fair, what's beautiful. As someone has explained, the purpose of Proverbs is not simply to make someone emotionally intelligent and able to live skillfully. Proverbs wants to make a person good as well as successful, which isn't always easy. That's the thing, because life is complicated, And so you're working with this person, and you know you're supposed to love him, but he's obnoxious. And he's just so obnoxious that you start to think, what does it look like to love a person like this? You have this idea, you really want to get it done, but the Bible warns you about being proud, and you have to push if you're going to get it accomplished. So you're like, what does it look like to be humble and still lead and get done what I need to get done? I think sometimes you pick up your Bible and you read the law, say Genesis through Deuteronomy, or even the prophets, and you find there's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of important principles that are very applicable to the stuff going on in your life, like don't be proud or love your neighbor. But sometimes the problem is, as you go to work or you're at home or you're with your friends, there's a lot of small little things that are happening every day, all the time, really quickly in our relationships with one another that have a lot of impact on those relationships, and that you don't find what you're reading in the law and the prophets talking specifically about, which is why God gave us a book like Proverbs. That's why Proverbs was written. It was written to help you develop the ability to take all of those principles you've learned in the law and the prophets and apply them in a way that matches up with what is good for you, good for others, and glorifies God. That's wisdom. It's skill in applying everyday truth to life. And the reason Proverbs can give us wisdom is because when God created the world, he actually created this world to work a certain way. And I think this is so cool. It's a second facet to the Hebrew word for wisdom, and it's important. Wisdom is a skill, one, for doing what's smart and also doing what's good. And two, this skill, you might say, has to do with the order of the universe. Think about it. How can you learn a skill, any skill? You say, well, you have to practice, you need instruction, all of those things, which is true. But even more fundamentally, the reason you can learn a skill to do something is because there's a certain way things work, right? If something is completely random, you can't learn a skill if it were truly completely random. You would just get lucky. I'm saying if every time I picked up a fabric and thread and used a sewing machine, it worked differently. There was no pattern. It just did all kinds of different things. Then there's no way I could ever learn to be a tailor. I can learn to be a tailor because there's an order to things. There's a certain structure that enables you to study those things, to find a pattern and practice and get better at them. And wisdom says that's not just true of carpentry or administration or sailing. That's also true for the universe itself. And I think this is key. There's a certain order to the universe. It's like when God created this world, he created it to work a certain way. And wisdom is knowing how it works and making choices in the middle of life that matches up with how God made the world to work. In fact, I can give you a picture to illustrate, because there's a really interesting way the writer of Proverbs puts it in Proverbs chapter 8, where he writes a poem. And in this poem, he has wisdom speaking. Most of Proverbs 1-9 is a father speaking to his son, but once in a while, the writer gets creative and pictures wisdom like a person, and he actually pictures wisdom like a lady. And in chapter 8, Lady Wisdom speaks and describes herself as being with God way back at the beginning of the world. She says, verse 22, "The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work. the first of his acts of old. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth, which at the very least means she's really, really old. And she goes on to describe just how old. When there was no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with weather. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills, I was brought forth. Before he had made the earth with its field, or the first of the dust of the world. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. When he made firm the skies above. When he established the fountains of the deep. When he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command. When he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him. As we go back, way, way, way back, all the way before creation, we see wisdom with God. And wisdom says she was involved with God as he was creating all these amazing things that we see. Verse 30, I was beside him like a master workman. And the idea, I think, this is poetry, but the idea, I think, is that we're supposed to picture wisdom as being something that God used to create the world, almost like a tool he's using. Proverbs 3:19 says, the Lord by wisdom founded the earth. And it's almost like before God created the world, he designed a plan for how the world would work, and that plan is wisdom. And then he uses wisdom as his blueprint to architect the world. And so when God was designing the universe, it's almost like he went to wisdom and was like, this is how I'm going to do it. Obviously, ultimately, we know wisdom is an attribute of God, but it's also a law, woven, you might say, into the DNA of the universe. And so as a result, there's this system behind the way the world works. Scientifically, we know, obviously, like there's the law of gravity. You throw something up, it comes down, and we can figure that out, of course. But not just scientifically, there's also a system to how this world is designed to work morally, relationally, socially. And the book of Proverbs is written to help us understand that better, which I think is exciting. Because if you go to a Bible teaching church for very long, you're going to discover Christians are different. A Bible teaching church is not a club, and it's not a place where you just go and get self-help talk. It's not the kind of place you can go and people will say, well, you don't have to do anything and you'll just magically be rich if you have enough faith. And Bible teaching churches don't make that kind of promise. Christians don't make those kind of promises because the Bible doesn't make those kind of promises. But you know, just because the Bible doesn't promise that if you just believe everything will go your way, it will go your way. The Bible doesn't just put all that into faith and say, if you just have enough faith, everything's going to be fine. That doesn't mean God isn't good. God's good. He is so good. And he absolutely wants your best. And one of the ways he shows he's good and that he wants your best is by stooping down and giving you information so that you can understand exactly how he designed this world to work best. I mean, are you hearing what I'm saying? I'm saying if we look back at the beginning of the world, we see that God created everything. And when God created everything, he created it to work a certain way. He put an order into the world. And obviously, he could have kept that order hidden so that we could never have had any idea how the world worked and continually be confused and continually be frustrated. But he's good and he's kind. And so he gave us his word and he raised up these men and enabled them to study his universe. And then he inspired them to write down what they learned so that we could better understand his basic blueprint for how life in this world is supposed to work. So we don't have to be simple. So we don't have to go through life doing things that honestly are not just wrong, but also are stupid. And that's Proverbs. That's the purpose of Proverbs. It's written to give you wisdom. What a book. Now, I'm going to tell you in the next video why getting wisdom is so important. And then how you can pursue wisdom. But come back next time.